The ocean is a vast, beautiful body of water, inhabited by an incredibly diverse web of life. Among them, saltwater fish, who, unlike freshwater fish, are specially adapted to withstand the high salinity of ocean water. The gills, kidneys, and even the amount of water that a saltwater fish must consume in comparison to a freshwater fish are all physiologically adapted to prevent the fish from becoming dehydrated.
Hold up. Wait a minute here. So you're telling me that a fish can become dehydrated in an ocean full of water?
That's right. You heard me correctly. I said dehydrated. And yes, I know exactly what you're thinking.
But that's ridiculous. How could a fish possibly become dehydrated in an ocean full of water? It's surrounded by water.
Well, in order to be able to answer your question, and as to why a saltwater fish needs to be physiologically adapted in order to survive the salty conditions of its environment, it's important that we first get a better understanding of what osmosis is and how it can cause the movement of water into and out of an organism's cells depending on the solvent and solute concentrations found in its environment.
Well, okay then. Educate me, narrator.
I like your attitude. Okay then. So now, without further ado, let's dive in and get started.
All right.
What is osmosis? Osmosis is the net overall movement of solvent molecules across a selectively permeable membrane from an area with a high concentration of solvent molecules to an area of lower concentration of solvent molecules. As seen in this animation, water molecules move from the side of the semi-permeable membrane from which they are more concentrated to the side where they are less concentrated. The selective permeability of a membrane.
Hey, I think I remember what a semi-permeable membrane is. You mind if I try explaining it?
Go for it. Maybe you could try explaining it to Tommy the Trojan there behind you.
Okay, I can do that. Alright, so let's begin. Okay, so from what I remember, a semi-permeable membrane is a flexible yet very sturdy barrier that surrounds our cells and those of fish alike. It's composed of a back-to-back layer of phospholipids and other lipid molecules like glycolipids and cholesterol, allowing the passage of certain substances like water and other nonpolar molecules, and preventing other molecules like, say, glucose and ion from easily going through.
Great job, thank you. Maybe you can help me with a few demonstrations now. Okay, so now that we know that osmosis is the movement of solvent molecules from an area of high concentration to an area where they are less concentrated, and that a semi-permeable membrane allows only certain substances through while preventing the passage of other molecules, we need to understand why osmosis occurs across the cell membrane. What is the purpose of osmosis? Under ideal conditions, the concentrations of solutes across a semi-permeable membrane should be relatively equal on both sides. If there are more solutes on one side of the membrane, ideally, in order to create equilibrium, these solutes would like to be able to freely move from the side of the membrane where they are more concentrated to the side where they are less concentrated. However, as we have just recently learned, because a semi-permeable membrane, such as a plasma membrane surrounding the cells of living organisms, only allows certain substances to move across, sometimes the solutes are trapped on one side and unable to move, creating a difference in concentration. Since the solutes cannot move across, either because they might be large polar molecules or need the help of another molecule in order to get through the membrane, much like glucose needs insulin, instead, water, which can freely move across a semi-permeable membrane, will move in order to balance out the concentrations on both sides. This, my friend, is osmosis, the movement of water across a membrane. So it sounds like osmosis is pretty beneficial to the cells of an organism, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Well, I'm afraid to tell you that that is not always the case. Sometimes, so much water can enter a cell to try to balance out the concentration of solutes on both sides of the semi-permeable membrane that the cell will actually burst. And that is not a good thing at all, because we want our cells hydrated, but not to the point where they can burst and stop functioning. At the same time, we also don't want too much water leaving and going out of our cells, because then they would become dehydrated. And, again, not a good thing, because our cells cannot survive under those conditions. So now that we have an understanding of what osmosis is and how it can cause a movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane into and out of an organism's cells, depending on the solvent and solute concentrations found outside in the environment relative to the concentrations found inside the cells, let's go back to our original question. How could a saltwater fish become dehydrated in an ocean full of water if it weren't for its special physiological adaptations? Water, as we know, is constantly moving in and out of the cells of a fish's body in order to maintain equilibrium. Because seawater has a higher salinity, that is, has a higher solute concentration and lower solvent concentration in comparison to the body fluids of a fish, which have a lower solute concentration and higher solvent concentration, water inside the fish is overall being lost to the environment, where there is a lower solvent concentration through the process of osmosis. Simply put, because the cell membrane is less permeable to ions such as salt, in order to maintain equilibrium, water must have a net movement from where it is most concentrated inside the fish's cells towards the outside where it is less concentrated, as seen here. As a result, if a saltwater fish did not drink to replace the lost water, its cells would dry up like prunes and the fish would become heavily dehydrated. So, a fish has to drink salt water. But, because seawater is so salty, a fish could get sick drinking seawater without some special adaptations. Special cells, found in the fish gills of a saltwater fish, help rid its body of most of the solutes taken in when it drinks the ocean water. Furthermore, in order to preserve the fluids in its body and help keep the cells hydrated, a fish's kidneys are physiologically adapted to produce less urine than, say, a freshwater fish. And, in efforts to further help the fish eliminate the excess solutes going into its body from drinking salt water, many solutes are also filtered out of the body by the kidneys via urine. Overall, the fish's kidneys make a small amount of very concentrated urine, low in water and high in salt concentration. So, as you can see, because saltwater fish have the ability to excrete large amounts of solutes from their gills, while their kidneys remove little water from the body, these physiological adaptations ensure its survival, something freshwater fish and sailors stranded at sea cannot do. Phew! Man, we sure did learn a lot today, and hopefully now you can have a better understanding of what osmosis is and how it could potentially dehydrate an ocean water fish if it weren't for its physiological adaptations. Well, that's all folks. Until next time.